Hey everyone, Caleb with Antique Book Collective, and today I'm getting to you guys with what may very well be the last copy of this book in the whole wide world. So this book, guys, I've mentioned it in a short video. In fact, that short video is one of the best videos that's performed on my channel, actually. I was surprised for that one. But in that video, guys, I showed off this book, and this book, guys, it is from 1751. So this book, guys, it is older than everyone I know, believe it or not. I'm not actually a vampire, even though I'm interested in some stuff that vampires would be interested in as an antique bookseller, I don't know. But with that said, though, guys, this book's title is Die Groffe Lenre von dem Generfren. I'm not good at German, but guys, this book, here's the title page. As you guys can see, it's in the old Gothic script, and as you can also tell, I'm not very good at reading old German. And something I want to point out, guys, is you can see right here, it looks like an I, but it's actually a J. The other part of the J is on this cover. It got ripped off at some point. This book got just wet enough to have it, so there was damage done. In fact, there is little bits of, like, once you are used to old books, you can feel certain things. So I can feel that there is, like, some mildewishness on this book. You could feel just that sort of gritty, really fine grittiness that you get from, like, dried mildew. So that is something that is on this book, which is a bit of a bummer. But at the end of the day, when you have a book like this book that may very well be the last copy of a book like this, it doesn't really matter just how bad it is sometimes. Like, yes, if it was in perfect condition, it'd be worth a whole lot more, but just because a book is a little bit beat up around the edges, just because it has some creases, just because it has some mildew, some water damage, that sort of stuff, it doesn't mean that it's not a book that's worth some very good money. In fact, I've had some books that have their covers ripped off. I have some books where, like, the front cover, back cover, and spine are all loose, separate from what they call the text block. The text block is where you have all the pages of the book. I've had books like that have sold for hundreds of dollars. So if you guys are brand new to selling antique books, just because you see an old book that is torn up, it doesn't mean that book is not valuable. So this book, guys, I don't actually know exactly what it's worth because, as I said already, I'm pretty sure this could be the last copy of this book in the whole world. The author, his name is Johann Melchior Goezen, something like that. He was a Lutheran pastor back in the day, so back in the 1700s he was a Lutheran pastor. So this book here is a first edition of one of his books. And when I was shopping around, or looking around, trying to find comps of this book, trying to find any evidence of this book anywhere, I ended up looking up the author himself, and I saw that he wrote several other books. And those other books, I saw some that were rattier, that were selling for like $60, but there were several of that particular book. And I saw several that were like $250, stuff in that sort of line. Quite a few were in the $200 range, and at the same time, though, those books, they had a lot of comps of those books. There were lots of other people that had sold those particular books. However, this book, guys, again, I could not find any record of it anywhere on the internet. And I didn't just check Google, because sometimes you can just check Google and it won't give you like all the results, and then you can like do in quotation marks the title of your book, and sometimes it'll pull some more things. But this, I tried that, and I tried DuckDuckGo, then I tried Bing, I tried all the different search engines that I could think of, and that is one good way that I normally try to find books, find comps for books that I just cannot find a comp for. I will check different search engines, because sometimes that helps stir things up, and at the end of the day, I still couldn't find it. So, I started checking out all these different libraries and all these different places, trying to find any record of this book anywhere in the whole wide world, and I still came up empty-handed. And believe it or not, this is not the first time I've come up empty-handed trying to find comps of a book. I've had quite a few books, guys, over the years that I cannot find no record of it anywhere. I can find records of the different authors, I can find records of the publisher, I can find records of all the different things about particular books, but I cannot find those particular books. If you guys sell antique books for a long time, you will find, I'm going to say, dozens of books like this over your career. In fact, I would say I probably find a dozen books that I cannot find a comp on because there are no records of it anywhere. I would say I find that, and I don't mean just like not comps for selling, I mean like not even finding books like this book. So like comps, I know people use it for like comparable items to sell, but I mean like when I'm looking up some of these things, I cannot find anything like this book. I can't even find reprintings of these books, because a lot of the time, if you hop on eBay, people are going to be selling a PDF version of the book where they scanned the book and now they're selling the PDF for like $30 or something. That's a comp, sort of, more or less. Like, it is evidence of this book being somewhere else. I have I'd say at least a dozen books a year where I cannot find anything about this book anywhere. So because of that, it really can make the books a lot more valuable, guys. I mean, a book like this, when you think that it could be the last one in the whole wide world, it really gets you thinking. You start thinking, what could this be worth? What can I charge for it? Should I donate it to a museum? All that sort of stuff. For me, I'm probably not going to donate it to a museum. I don't really need the tax write-off for that. And in addition to that, museums, by and large, they just will put it in a box and not really address it, or they might scan it and do some things. I personally think there is more use and more love for a book if it can actually be used and loved by a new owner. Like for me, I like being able to touch the books myself, and there are a lot of people that say, hey, you shouldn't touch books with your bare hands. You need gloves on to do it. However, I've heard quite a few more arguments about how you should not wear gloves, about how the books do need to get touched a little bit. I mean, they were made to be touched. So you do need to do your own research on that. For me personally, I do touch the books with my bare hands, unless, of course, if the book is tens of thousands of dollars, in which case I might wear some gloves. I've only had one book over the years that is worth tens of thousands of dollars, though. Thousands of dollars, yeah, I might think about it, but again, I don't have a whole lot of books that are worth thousands of dollars, just a few over the years. But end of the day, though, guys, books like this, they may seem incredibly rare. It may seem impossible to find a book that is the last copy of a particular book in the world, but at the end of the day, it's actually not that uncommon for me, because I've been doing this for so long. I look in all these different places. If you guys want to find books like this that are the last copies of these books in the whole wide world, potentially, just be sure to subscribe. You can do it down there or down below. You can just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon also so it pops up, hit the like button so this video gets out to more people. But it's really not that hard to find more books like this. Again, I go over a lot of different videos where I shop for books. Where I shop for books, of course, is where I find books like this. This book here actually came from an estate sale. This estate sale, guys, it had water damage out of the wazoo and so many of these books. So this book here actually came out of a box that was full of other books that had some water damage. So I was nervous when I was going through this box. I bought the whole box sight unseen because I was just like, I know these books here are at least 1800s. So I was like, I'm just going to buy them just because I can. The pricing, it was a little high, but I was still like, I'm going to go for it. And end of the day, I found two really old books. This was one of them. The other book was from 1744, but the rest of them were just 1800s, which I know that sounds very exciting, very old, and it is pretty old, but when you find books from the 1800s and then books like this that are from the 1700s, 1800s just doesn't sound very exciting anymore. But with that said, though, guys, back to this book. So I just wanted to go over some more history about this particular book, this author, that sort of stuff. So first off, the book itself, you know how I said I couldn't find any records of it anywhere? So because I couldn't find any records, I actually went and made my own record for it on Wikipedia. So I'm opening that up right now. I'm not going to show you guys, but I just want to hop on down to it and sort of read it for you guys. But it's fun with Wikipedia how sometimes you'll have information from different authors. A lot of these authors are authors that have been long since dead, and this is potentially the only information you can get on some of these authors because, again, they've just been dead for so long that people don't really reference them so often. So Wikipedia is oftentimes the only place where you can access information. I know there's people that say, oh, don't trust Wikipedia for anything because the information's not necessarily true, which is true, but at the same time, sometimes it is a good basis for you to start your research for if you cannot find any information on a particular author. If nothing else, Wikipedia is a very good source to, you just open the article on, so let's say my dude right now, Johann, I open it up on pastor or priest Johann, I don't remember what it is for the Lutheran Church, but yeah, you open it up. Maybe you don't read all the stuff because you don't want to trust Wikipedia, but you can hop on down to the reference section, and from the reference section, you can hop out and find actual reputable things. So with that said, though, guys, I have right here at the bottom of the current book list works that he did. I actually have the entry that I did, and I had to use Google Translate to translate German because I don't speak German. I know a little bit, but not nearly enough. But according to Google Translate, the title of this book is The Great Teaching of the Young Judgment, which I'm sure is not a correct translation there. So feel free, guys, if you do know German, please comment down below of what the actual translation of this title is. In fact, because I do not know German well enough, and because I want you guys to be able to do it well, here's the title again. Again, this thing that looks like an I is actually a J, but here's this for you guys. please feel free to comment on what the translation actually is, and maybe I'll update the thing on Wikipedia, or you guys can do it. It's up to you guys. But according to my translation that I used on Google Translate, the great teaching of the young judgment in some sacred discourses dealt with, and I ended the translation there because it didn't really have anything else for me on Google Translate. So I'm sure the translation is not necessarily correct, but at the end of the day, it still is pretty cool, because this book, guys, it's just so rare, so old, that sort of stuff. So with that said, though, guys, this book, as I was saying already, was written by a Lutheran pastor. His name was Johann, as I've gone over before. Johann Melchior Goezen. It's interesting because on the Wikipedia page, it actually cuts the N off of his name, which is actually something I see pretty often with a lot of names from, I would even say, the 1800s, but especially the 1700s, because from what I've gathered, the different dialects over the years, the different translations. So you guys know how when people move to America, like my last name actually was translated a good chunk, but not so insanely much that it's unrecognizable. But my mother's maiden name was also translated a good chunk, so it's like not necessarily unrecognizable, but it was translated enough that it was easy to say in English, but not necessarily reflective of the original German names. So that is something that I have seen quite a lot, just things that get lost in translation, but also just because of different dialects. So as I've said in the other video about the 1744 book, Letters Perçants, which is the French book, the author there, which I find especially is the case with French books, the author there, his name, if you even check the internet, it's written like 5 different ways, and it's because France has so many different, well, used to have at least, they still sort of have some different dialects, but back in the day, especially back then, they had, I believe it was like 5 different main dialects in their country. That might not necessarily be the correct number, but there's different dialects, and every dialect will spell things sort of differently. So with German, I'm sure it's the same case. In fact, I've seen it written the same way, so I know it's the same case. But that's just something that I find is oftentimes the case. So sometimes when you find a book, you will have to sort of like fudge the numbers, if you will, fudge the letters in this case, though, and be like, okay, so this name is not spelled exactly like the name of my dude, however, and you sort of just have to think, okay, so that is the correct year for this thing. This guy wrote the same sort of books, all that sort of stuff. You guys sort of have to use your brain a little bit when you're identifying that sort of stuff. If there is a name change, oftentimes the name change is not like extreme, but sometimes it can be quite substantial at the same time. So it really is a play-by-play sort of thing. I can't really guarantee that it's always going to be one way or the other, but that is something definitely to keep in mind. With that said, though, guys, I just wanted to continue talking about this book, showing off this book a little bit more to you guys. Something I think sort of funny. So I've said in other videos that I have seen bookworm damage in books, and in fact I didn't actually notice that there was bookworm damage in this book until I was just now looking at it to show you guys. So I think this is sort of funny. So right here we're on page 239, and as you guys can see, like front and center, you have a hole going straight through it. So right at the tip of my middle finger right here. So that's a hole from a bookworm, and that bookworm looks like he really went to town. He just kept on going. That's like 40 pages later, and it looks like it stops. Nope, it still goes barely through here. Ooh, it's pretty bad on this page here, but it's funny because sometimes you will find just bookworm stuff in books, and sometimes you'll find random scraps of paper as well, which I'm going to leave that in there in case it's important. I don't think it's important, but it might be. I don't know. But it's really fun, though, guys, when you have books like this, because not only will you find the occasional bit of bookworm damage, which I just think so interesting that bookworms used to be such an issue for how little of an issue they are now. But with that said, the bookworm damage is definitely a problem with this book. Not really the end of the world. It doesn't really affect readability too terribly much. It does hurt a couple words, but if you do know German, you'll probably be able to put together what the book said. But with that said, though, guys, I'm just going to continue showing you guys just random pages from this book. There's so much artisticness. I mean, there's so much beauty in this book that is just something you do not see in books anymore. And in addition to that, the fact that this may very well be the last time that any human being sees this book, like let's say my house burns down and this book gets lost. This could be the last time that anyone sees any of these words in this book. I mean, it's just insane to think about. And honestly, I do feel a little bit bad for like knowing that this book might not be seen ever again, but at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot I can do. And something else, though, that I think is interesting about this book is, I mean, you guys can see here how large the text is at the very beginning of the book for how small that it gets as you go later on into the book. And that's something that I see sometimes with older books. Sometimes you'll have like a few different size fonts throughout the book. I suspect that's because of the printing process. Like potentially if they wanted to have the introduction part of the book be like large so you can really see it, have it sort of be eye-catching, and then have the rest of the pages be with smaller font, because at the end of the day, smaller font means more words per page, which means less paper used. And at the end of the day, paper was a lot more expensive back in the day. In fact, something that I thought was very interesting, I can't remember which founding father it was, but one of the founding fathers had this massive library, all of his own books, and when America was founded, he actually donated the large majority of his collection, if not all of his collection, I don't remember exactly which way, but he donated it to the United States, and a lot of those books ended up becoming the Library of Congress. I believe the Library of Congress books that he donated were actually burned during the War of 1812, or some other fire in there. I'm sorry, I don't know all the history off the top of my head, but at the end of the day, people were very shocked about him doing such because back in the 1700s, books were incredibly expensive. It was very hard to get books. In fact, one of the driving forces behind the Revolutionary War was the fact that the printing press, you guys know Benjamin Franklin, he had his newspaper, and the printing press, it was able to revolutionize and get even more paper and books into people's hands, more reading material in people's hands, and because of that, because they made it more accessible and cheaper for people to do, and because a lot of the pamphlets that they did, it was like you pay 25 cents. I think it was even less than 25 cents, but let's just say 25 cents for today dollars. You would buy it, and then you were encouraged in the book and by other people to then hand that book off to someone else. And that was sort of what helped stoke the wildfire rebellion to get the United States free from tyranny, the first time at least. And that was one of the things that helped, was a driving force, was how they made books a little more affordable, and even the more expensive books ended up sort of helping build America to be what it was. I mean, people saw the incredible act of generosity of donating your entire personal library, and it was a very large personal library. They saw that and were like, wow, this guy really means it when he says that he loves this country, and because of that, I just think it's really interesting the history that books alone have with the United States. And in addition to all that, so the other book that I mentioned earlier in this video, guys, Letters Perçants. So that book, guys, it was actually written under a pseudonym, a fake name, a pen name, for this one, I want to say it was an Italian guy. It might have been I think it was a French guy, my bad, who was in the more monarchy court sort of thing. He was a baron, I believe it was, and his books, one of his books was The Spirit of the Law, and The Spirit of the Law was a book that was written before the Revolutionary War of the Americans, and that book actually was very foundational to the writing of the Constitution and to the forging of the Founding Fathers' thought, which I just think is another very interesting fact about books and the history of the United States. Is America is a country of books, if you really think about it. Like, so many cornerstones of what made America America was either because of books, because of printing, or because of the thoughts brought forward by books. And at the end of the day, I think that's a really incredible thing. That's an incredible heritage for a country to have. So I think that's something that's really stinking dandy. So with that said, though, guys, this book right here, I'm going to just shorten its name to Die Groffe Lenre, which is what I shortened it to in the previous shorts video that I made. But this book, again, guys, it's from 1751. It is written by a Lutheran pastor named Johann Melchior Goezen. Again, I'm sure I'm pronouncing everything under the sun wrong, but this book, guys, it's just incredible. And in fact, I'm just going to continue showing you guys just a little bit more of it. And the reason why I'm doing the weird angles is just to really make sure the light catches it so you guys can see just how bumpy this leather cover is. Something I love about some of these 1800s books, guys, is how bumpy the leather covers are, because they didn't spend hours and hours and hours making it perfectly smooth. They sort of kept the natural beauty of just leather. And I mean, at the end of the day, I just think it makes the book all the more stunning. And something else that I just think is so interesting is how thin the leather is that they stretched over these books. I mean, you could see I can't remember what the exact phrase is, but basically the cardboard that they made the hardcover with. I mean, you could see just how thin it is between the leather and the cardboard, which again, I know it's not the right word. I'm just brain farting on what the correct word is. But I just think it's incredible, all these different books, how they made them, how they've lasted, and the stories of these books. Like, it's crazy to think that a pastor who wrote books in the 1700s would have some of his books still around today, have people buying and reading these books of his other books, and then find a book like this that no one knows about, as far as I know, just kicking around. This was in someone's basement. It's like, wow, what else is hidden out there? What other finds are there waiting for us booksellers to find, us book collectors to find, us passionate history nerds to find, you know? It's just crazy to think that there is stuff out there waiting for us, and at the end of the day, if you guys want to sell antique books like me, you can make some really good money finding these books and selling these books, and cough, cough, on the way to selling it, you can always read these books yourself. Like for me personally, I cannot read German, so I'm not going to read this book. Honestly, I'd love to learn German, but the fact that this is written in the old German script, I guess that might make things a little bit harder for me, but it still is quite the impressive thing for me to just think about. And I have read a few of the books that I've had pass through my hands. Sometimes I'm not able to finish books, so I have to go and buy the book myself elsewhere. Usually a lot of the books that I try to read are ones that are currently available elsewhere, but sometimes there are the books like this that there aren't any other ones like it. So with all that said and done though, guys, thank you for watching. I'm just going to say another personal plea, guys. I need people like you, all of you, to help me find antique books like this, because when you find antique books like this and you try to sell them, or you keep them yourself, or you donate them to a museum or anything like that, you're saving these books from going into the dump, because a lot of these books, guys, people just throw them away because they think they aren't worth anything. In fact, you guys know how I told you how this book had some water damage, it has the bookworm damage, all that sort of stuff. People will see that and say, oh, this book's not worth anything, I'm going to throw it away. They will see the creases on this cover and say, oh, it's a messed up leather book, it's not worth anything, I'm going to throw it away. People see these things and they just throw them away. They see the damage and they think it's worth nothing. But at the end of the day, there's still the history in it, there's still the information in it, and sometimes those books are the very last copies of those books. So sometimes those books are worth a good chunk of money. So you can make a whole lot of money buying and selling antique books, especially like ones that are potentially the last ones of these kinds in the world. You can make good money doing that. Plus, if you guys are a book collector, like for me, I love collecting books, you can have a book like this and you can show it off to all your friends, be like, hey, see this thing right here? Not only is it older than your mom, oh, sorry, your mom joke. Not only is it incredibly old though, but it's also potentially the last one in the world. I mean, it's just incredible to see something like that. And for book collection bragging, I mean, you can't beat that, you know? I mean, the only thing you can beat that with is like this book here is like 2,000 years old, 2 million years old, you know? I mean, it's pretty hard to find a book that old. So something like this, it's a lot more accessible. And for me, guys, I've mentioned this in other videos. I live in Oregon. Oregon has not been colonized long enough to have a good history of just antique books kicking around in people's basements, because like 99% of the homes here have been built in the last 150 years. So when you find an antique book here, it's really impressive, because a lot of times the book is older than the building you're finding it in, because people bought the book and then brought it in. Whereas like if you are in Europe, like I know lots of people are in Europe, I know lots of people are in China, where you have a lot more history, where you have just things getting unearthed all the time. There are a whole lot more antique books kicking around in places like that. Sometimes those books can be the last copies of those books in the world. In fact, if you're dealing with stuff that's old enough before the printing press, these things very well could be the last copies of those in the world, because you did not have the mass production of a printing press. This book here was made with a printing press, but a lot of books back in the day, you had to handwrite them. So with that said though, guys, there's a lot of money to be had, there's a lot of fun to be had, and there's just a pleasure in collecting old books and saving history. So with all that said and done though, guys, I would love for you guys to subscribe. It would mean the world to me, because if you subscribe, that means you get to see more videos on how I save books and how I do all my stuff. And in addition to that, be sure to check out one of my other videos so I can show you where I shop for books, all that sort of stuff. And with all that said and done though, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.